All right, guys. Today I'm going to try to talk to you a bit about getting a better accuracy in your drawings. And I think that's super duper important. And so there's some things we're going to go over. First of all, here's a photograph of my kids walking down the beach in Fortescue. And that's what we're going to use as our source material, right? And then over here, I have the drawing paper that I'm going to work with, and then I have a ruler like this, right? And so what I want to do is I want to try to measure out, not necessarily the piece of paper that's here, but I want to try to measure out the photograph itself. So going in this direction, that's 8 and 1/8, right? So we got 8 and 1/8. And then going down this direction here, I'm going to try to measure out the photograph again. Here we're looking at 10 and 5/8, all right? So 10 and 5/8. And those are the measurements I really want to kind of have drawn out on this paper here. So up here, I'm going to try to measure out, and there's a perforation on this page that I'm going to use as my 0 mark. Maybe it's better if I try to give it a little border all the way around. I'm going to use 8.5 then, I think, as my border mark. And then that should give us kind of equal distance on either side, or something similar to equal distance on either side. All right, so here, 8 and 1/8 is going to get a mark, and then I'm going to mark the 0. And then I'm going to pull this down. It's not exactly even, is it? Come on now. Ah, that's close enough. All right, so 8 and 1/8, and then down here we're going to do the same thing. 8 and 1/8 is going to get this mark down here. Over here I'm going to mark the 0, right? And then I'm going to pull this in this direction, and I'm going to do the same thing here, now inside of these marks, right? And I'm going to go for, what did I say, 10 and 5/8. So I want to pull this up a little bit. I'm going to say to 11.5. So 11.5 is going to be the edge of the paper here, so I have a border around the outside edge. And then we're going to measure to 10 and 5/8, so a 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 and 5/8, right? And we're going to mark the 0 down here. And then same thing over here. 10 and 5/8 is right here. And then we're going to mark the 0 over there. And hopefully you guys can see that when it's on camera. All right. Now, this gives me a border, right? So I know my photograph is pretty much the exact same size as this rectangle I'm going to draw on my paper. All right, now I have this kind of border on the paper that's the same size as the photograph that I'm working from. And what I want to do then is I want to start to, take some measurements to start to place some things from the photograph over here. And we could place some major players in there. So one of the things I might take a measurement of is maybe the sky, right? So we'll say from the sky to where it hits these trees here, we'll take a measurement, right? We'll say from the edge of there to there, it's about that long, right? And then over here, we're going to lay that measurement down, right? The exact same way that we just got done doing it. Then we're going to take another measurement, right? We'll do the same thing over here, And we'll say from the top here to where those trees hit. All right, we'll take another measurement, and that'll be the measurement for this end. All right, so then I have this kind of area up here. I know is basically where those trees go. And I can kind of make a little light mark in there if I'd like to at that point. And then I can make some, some other measurements, like maybe we can measure to where this water is from the outside edge. So if I kind of go from the outside edge in, go from the outside edge in, I'll know that the water kind of ends in there, but then we also want to go the other way, right? From the top down, and then from the top down. You can see this really needed to move up a little bit. So that mark should be about here, right? That's where the water comes around to at its sharpest or farthest in, right? Now, there is some water on the beach, but I mean the actual physical water itself, we know that that's the place that it comes around to. Then we can say, where does this start here, right? And we can actually measure from just these trees down, because we already have a mark to where the trees are, and just make a little tiny bit of the thing like this, and then go like over here, same kind of idea. Now we know this water actually starts out here, and then this water moves at a curve around to this dot, right? And then we can say the same thing again. We can actually measure from the top of the water now to the bottom of the water. We'll say this is the bottom of the water. All right, and we'll do the same thing here, just the bottom of the water. Then we know that this kind of meanders around a little bit in order to kind of meet that section, right? This kind of meanders up there too, but we'll have it meander a little bit more. All right, and then we have an idea of where this water is placed. Is it perfect? No, it's not perfect. But does it really matter all that much? No, it's not the end of the world. We just want to keep on kind of taking some relative measurements, right? Saying to ourselves, oh, this is where this belongs, that's where that belongs. And we can kind of keep on working through the whole thing just to kind of place out some rough sections to give ourselves an idea if we're getting it the right way, right? So one of the things we might want to measure out is where my son's hand is here in the picture, right? So then we can say from the bottom, we can take a measurement from the bottom to his hand, like this. So his hand is going to be right in there. Oh, it didn't make a mark. And then, same thing, we can measure from his hand, let's say to the edge of his body. We'll go this way, here to here, here to there, right? Now we know that's where the edge of his body is there, and we could do the same thing in this direction, here to here, here to there. And we know that's where the edge of his body is going to hit again. We can think about from his hand to the top of his head here, right? So here to there, here to there. But then we're actually pulling that over in this direction quite a bit, right? Let's see, did I get this right? Yeah, about here, right? So we can start to place some of these objects, and then if we really wanted to, we are at his head at this point in time. So we could kind of put that in as a bit of a circle if we'd like. We might want to measure how big his head is over here. So if I take that measurement like that, and I come over here and go, oh, maybe I made this circle a little too big. Right? We want to make it a little bit smaller than that. That's his whole head. It's just the size of the wood that's there. His whole head's just the size of the wood that's there. And then we can think about his shoulders, right? And we can think about how far they are in what direction. But they're pretty equidistant from the head in either direction. So then we can just kind of take a measurement across the shoulders like this. We can measure out like this. That's where that shoulder is going to be. And we can measure out the same thing in the other direction. All right, like this. That's where the other shoulder is going to be. And we can actually just draw in a little bit of this. And we could keep on plotting our way through this image exactly like that. You know, where is this line? Well, we know that line starts right off of the shoulder, and we know it kind of attaches to this line in here. And it's at a bit of an angle, or an arc rather. Right, very small arc that's in here. Kind of continues around. And where does it start? Where does it end? Like this and like that. Oh, we're pretty good, right? And anytime you can find a mark that's like this, that kind of simplifies down, you know, the human body a little bit, you know, you should run with it. You should use it. It's important, so that, you know, you have some different sections where you can go through and figure things out. If I think about a horizontal line going through here, that'll help me line up the elbow with the armpit over here. If I bring in a horizontal line across like this, you can actually see that the little dip in the shirt and the elbow line up, and then the armpit and armpit line up, right? So we think about the little armpit space here, and then the dip in the shirt pulls down just a little bit, and it's like it's blowing in the breeze a little, and then it kind of comes around, doesn't it? Here I can try to mimic an angle a bit if I'd want to. And then I also want to figure out where this arm is, or how far from the body it is. Maybe we'll draw on some of the rest of this body first. We know this kind of comes around like this, and then we get into the section that is his hip. One of the super important things to do in here is to think about how to drop a plumb line along your figure to try to figure out where that plumb really works. So here I could bring a plumb line along through the middle of his neck here, and we can think about how his head is slightly leaned forward because he's looking at the ground. But then as we cut down, we can see the weight of his body is shifting from one leg to the other. And if we kind of think about the same thing over here, or try to place it in the same spot, that can help us quite a bit as we're drawing to figure out where along that plumb each section of his body goes. So you can think this line here, the one that's here, we'll notice that this foot actually crosses across the plumb here because of that shifting weight. So a little earlier, I made up this example of my other son, and I drew him without paying attention to plumb over here, and then I drew him really trying to pay attention to plumb, but I did it without it placing any lines on this. And the real importance of it was so that, you know, once you have kind of plumb in there, you can see right away where there's problems. So if I run a plumb line, and we're just going to do it the same as before, right through the center of the back of his neck, right, from the top to the bottom in this drawing, you can see where his weight is shifting off of this leg and being placed onto the leg that's here. His foot is stepping down, right? Now, and you can see that very physical act right here, where this foot is literally lifting, and this one is actually starting to displace the dirt underneath of it. If I just kind of freehand draw sometimes, though, and I forget about plumb, you can have the ability to shift the body quite a bit underneath of it. So if I take that same idea here and I run that plumb kind of right down the same section of his neck that I was in the other one, you can see in here where I've messed up kind of how to put the bottom part of his body, and instead I have it kind of going in front of where the rest of him is going. So here it has a feeling of weight, but here it kind of seems like he's about to fall down or losing his balance because this part of his body is too far in this direction, right? So, if we think about, how weight works, or how people, put their weight on their body, this looks like he's moving in front of himself too much. So it's just another way of trying to organize, some of the space in there, but really trying to think through, the body weight or shifting angles, so that you can take little measurements. I know from plumb here, then if I measure over here from that same plumb line, like we did with my other son, that I can get this to become much more formalized or regulated, right? And so that it becomes regular, it's the right size, and I can keep on kind of plotting through an object just like that. One of the other things we should really think about when we're looking at drawings like this is also something called size relationships, right? So if we're looking at a particular object, let's say the head that we had here, we can use this to kind of break up space a bit. We can say that this head is this big, right? And then we can kind of use that measurement again and again in an idea called relative proportion. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and technically that would be 7, but if you look at the back of his foot, it's probably more like 6.5, which means that he's in perfect relative proportion to his head, right? So if we take the head measurement and we kind of go down like this, we can plan that out on another piece of paper as well and help us with the actual final idea. So if we take this measurement from the top of here to the bottom of here as equals, right, equals 1 head we can then think about the same thing going on right here, right? Here, 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 here. But you can see that this is going to actually cut in because his foot is being lifted. Even though this is farther than that, his foot's being lifted up in space. So he fits a relative proportion in there as well, and that's another thing to keep in mind. So basically what happens as a person is about, I'm going to say, 6½ times the size of one head measurement, right? And that really works out a lot when you're dealing with a picture like this too. So rather than just trying to take a physical measurement from the top of him to the bottom of him or something like that, you could just take a smaller measurement. We could see this in other things too. We could say like, oh, maybe we can try to look at the length of his arm as compared to the length of his leg, right? And we can see right away that this length is very similar to this length, right? Now we gotta remember that the leg starts past the buttocks, right? So here and then below the buttocks out, it would be like counting the whole shoulder as being part of the arm, where it's not, right? It's the shoulder. So if we kind of like, think the same thing here, that is a relative measurement when we're working, just like the head size is a relative measurement. So those are some ideas to keep in mind as you're going through and doing your drawing as well, and something that you could use in order to keep something with better accuracy, or making a drawing that has better accuracy. All right, and as we kind of continue forward with this then too, you can see we can figure out, where exactly my older son is. I'm going to do the same thing we were doing before. We know where the trees are, so we can take a measurement from the top of the trees to the top of his head, right? So his head will be up in this way. Then we can take a measurement from the side of the photograph to the edge of his shoulder. All right, we'll know his shoulder comes across about that far. And we can do the same thing to his other shoulder, right, across like this. And the idea here is this will help you, of course, gain a lot of accuracy in your drawings, or improve your accuracy. Or that's the concept of it, right? Improving accuracy. We might go all the way down, figure out how far his foot is from the bottom. All right, and the same concept as before. All right, guys, I think that might help you a bit with understanding how you can use some pencil measuring remember, measuring with the end of your pencil. You could leave it flat like this if you like to. I pick mine up most of the time because it goes quicker for me. But if you want to use it flat, remember when we were measuring in, we hit some of these dots, right? And pencil measuring is really, really best if you've given it, this pre-prepared border that we have here. So we have a border that goes all the way around the page. And once you have that pre-prepared border in there, that's the same size as the photograph you're working from, that'll help out a lot because then you can use that edge to help you place things inside of this drawing, right? And so what we're looking for is better accuracy in our drawings, right? And so here we're trying to get some of that better accuracy going on by taking measurements, dropping plumb lines, working with horizontals, right? And just going through and trying to find shapes, right? And structure like we were talking about before. Then taking lots and lots and lots of pencil measurements. And sometimes even if you have an angle and you want to make sure that that angle is about right, just kind of moving back and forth between two different areas can help a lot with getting an angle down. So I'm not going to take this drawing any farther, but I want you guys to try to work on one of these, and I'll let you know how it's going to go. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.